at that beauty burn.
I hope you have good insurance, rich boy.
You know, there's a specific smell that comes from burning money. It's not just the acrid scent of melting rubber, or the chemical sting of high-end Italian leather turning to ash. It's the smell of dreams dying, the smell of 80-hour work weeks and missed birthdays and instant ramen. Dinners all going up in smoke because someone with a trust fund decided you didn't deserve to exist in their space. I stood there in the parking lot of the Gilded Grove, watching orange flames lick the hood of my midnight blue McLaren 720S, a car I had named the Phantom, and I didn't scream, I didn't throw a punch. I just stood there with my hands in my pockets, feeling the heat on my face, watching $400,000 of engineering genius turn into a bonfire while a guy named Brody Harrington laughed like he was watching a fireworks show. But let me back up a second, because to understand why I didn't lose my mind right there on the asphalt, you have to understand where I came from, and, more importantly, who I really was, because Brody didn't know. He looked at a 28-year-old black man in a tailored suit and saw a target, saw an anomaly, saw something that needed to be corrected, but he didn't see the rest of the picture. My name is Dante Sterling, and 3 hours before my car became a crime scene, I was just a son trying to buy a birthday present for the woman who scrubbed floors until her knees were swollen so I could sit in a corner office. I had pulled into the Grove around 6 p.m. The sun was setting, casting this long, golden light over the boutique storefronts, and I felt good, you know. I had just closed a massive civil rights case against a housing authority in D.C., the kind of case that changes lives, and I was finally debt-free. The McLaren wasn't just a car. It was a trophy, a physical manifestation of every no I had ever turned into a yes. I parked in a spot away from other cars, you know the drill, protecting the paint, and walked toward Lumiere, this high-end scarf shop my mom loved but would never step foot in because she said the sales clerks looked at her like she was going to steal the hangers. Sitting at a patio table nearby were 3 guys who looked like they were auditioning for a villain role in a college movie. Leading the pack was Brody Harrington, 35 going on 12, wearing a polo shirt that cost more than my first car, and nursing a scotch that he clearly didn't enjoy. Next to him were his shadows, Kyle and Trent, guys who existed solely to chuckle at Brody's bad jokes. I saw them watching me as I walked past. I felt that familiar weight, that gaze that scans you for flaws, for cracks, for a reason to reject you. "Nice rental," Brody called out, his voice slurring just enough to let me know this wasn't his first drink of the afternoon. "Who's the rapper you're driving for?" I didn't stop, didn't flinch, just kept walking because my father, a man who built his career on composure, always taught me that lions don't turn around when small dogs bark. I went into the shop, bought a silk scarf that was the color of a deep bruise, my mom's favorite, and had a nice conversation with the salesgirl, Sarah, who told me I was a good son, which honestly was the highlight of my day. But when I came back out, the atmosphere had shifted. The air felt thicker, charged with static. Brody and his crew weren't at the table anymore. They were standing by my car, leaning on it, actually leaning on the carbon fiber like it was a park bench. "Excuse me," I said, keeping my voice low, smooth, the voice I used when I was cross-examining a hostile witness. "I think you're mistaking my vehicle for furniture." Brody turned around, a smirk plastered on his face that looked like it had been surgically attached. "Your vehicle? Come on, man, drop the act. We know you don't own this." "What, did you snag the keys from the valet stand? Taking it for a joyride before the owner comes back?" "I have the registration in the glove box," I said, stepping closer, my hand extended palm up, non-threatening. "If you'd kindly step away, I'll be on my way, and we can all pretend this awkward interaction never happened." "I don't think so," Brody said, and he took a sip of his drink, letting a stream of amber liquid spill down his chin and onto the hood of my car. "See, we have a neighborhood watch sort of vibe here, and you don't fit the demographic, buddy. We think you stole it." A crowd was starting to form now, because of course they were. People love a spectacle as long as they aren't the ones in the center of it. Phones came out, 20 glowing rectangles capturing the moment, and I saw Sarah watching from the shop window, her hand over her mouth. I sighed, a deep, weary exhale. "I'm calling the police," Brody announced, pulling out his phone like it was a weapon. "My buddy Officer Miller patrols this beat. He'll love this." "Call him," I said, leaning against the light pole. "Ask for a supervisor while you're at it." Brody didn't like that. He wanted fear. He wanted me to stutter, to run, to beg, but I was just bored, or maybe I was just tired of having to prove I existed. Officer Miller arrived in record time, lights flashing, siren chirping just once to announce his presence. He was a guy who looked like he did push-ups for fun and regarded empathy as a character flaw. He bypassed me completely and walked straight to Brody, shaking his hand. "What's the problem, Mr. Harrington?" Miller asked, his back turned to me. "Caught this guy trying to break into this McLaren," Brody lied, smooth as silk. "He claims it's his. Got real aggressive when we asked for proof." Miller turned to me, his hand resting on his belt, right near his holster. "Step away from the vehicle, sir." "It's my car, officer," I said, keeping my hands visible. "My briefcase is inside. It has the bill of sale, my bar card, and the receipt for the scarf I just bought." "I didn't ask for your resume. I asked you to step back," Miller barked, moving into my personal space. "ID, now." I handed over my license. Miller looked at it, looked at the car, looked at me, and I could see the gears turning in his head, trying to find the discrepancy, the lie. "Dante Sterling," he read aloud. "You got a record, Dante?" "No." "You sure? Because you look nervous." "I'm not nervous, officer. I'm late for dinner." "He's drunk," Brody chimed in, stepping forward. "He was swerving when he pulled in, nearly took out a stroller." "That's a lie," I said, my voice hardening. "Field sobriety test," Miller said, snapping his notebook shut. "Now." I stood there on the pavement, surrounded by 40 strangers, and I performed the dance. I walked the line, I touched my nose, I counted backward from 100, I balanced on one leg like a flamingo in a suit, and I did it all perfectly because I don't drink when I drive, ever. But it didn't matter. "I'm detecting signs of impairment," Miller said, lying through his teeth. "I'm going to need to search the vehicle for open containers or narcotics." "You do not have my consent to search," I said, my allow your brain engaging. "You have no probable cause." "I have witness testimony of erratic driving," Miller smirked, pointing at Brody. "That's probable cause." Brody was loving this. He was bouncing on the balls of his feet, energized by the power trip. He walked over to the car while Miller was distracting me. "Hey, officer, I think I see something under the seat." "Get away from the car," I shouted, stepping forward. Miller shoved me back, hard. "Stay back, don't you move on me." And that's when it happened. Brody pulled out a silver Zippo lighter, flicked it open, and grinned. "You know, stolen property is a burden on the state," he said, his eyes glittering with something manic. "We should just get rid of the evidence." He dropped the lighter through the open window, right onto the passenger seat where the leather had been soaked with the spilled scotch. "No," I lunged, but Miller tackled me, slamming me onto the hood of his cruiser, cuffing my hands behind my back as the interior of my McLaren turned into an inferno. The heat hit us instantly, a wave of hot air that pushed the crowd back. The leather caught, the foam caught, and within seconds, the cabin was a swirling vortex of orange. I watched my briefcase burn. I watched the scarf for my mother turn to ash. I watched 6 years of my life melt away while Brody and his friends high-fived. "Oops," Brody laughed. "Must have been an electrical fire. These Italian cars are so unreliable." Miller didn't arrest him. He didn't even yell at him. He just stood there, holding me down, watching the fire like it was a campfire. "You're going to regret this," I whispered into the metal of the cruiser. "Shut up," Miller hissed. You're lucky I don't book you for arson. I stopped fighting. I went limp. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smoke, and I looked at Miller. I need to make a phone call. You can call your lawyer from the station. I'm not calling a lawyer, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming something cold and dangerous. I'm calling my father. And by law, you have to let me verify my emergency contact. Miller rolled his eyes, pulled my phone from my pocket, and held it up to my ear, probably thinking I was calling some dad who would come down and yell. He didn't know. He had no idea. I dialed. 2 rings, Dante? The voice on the other end was deep, gravelly, the voice of a man who commanded Senate hearings and golfed with presidents. You're late for dinner. Your mother is threatening to eat the cake without you. Dad, I said, and my voice cracked just a little. I'm at the Gilded Grove. My car is on fire. I'm in handcuffs. There was a silence on the other end of the line, a silence so heavy it felt like the air pressure dropped. Are you hurt? No, but the police officer is helping the man who started the fire. Who is the officer? Badge number 4922, name is Miller. The arsonist is Brody Harrington. Harrington, my father repeated, the name tasting bad in his mouth. Preston's kid. Stay calm, Dante. Do not say another word. Keep your eyes open. I'm 10 minutes away. The line went dead. Miller pulled the phone away, smirking. Daddy coming to save you? What's he gonna do? Write a bad Yelp review? Brody walked over, the fire reflecting in his eyes. Look at him, Miller. He's crying to his pops. Pathetic. Hey buddy, maybe next time don't steal cars you can't afford. I didn't answer. I just looked at the horizon where the sun had fully set and waited. Because I knew what was coming. I knew that my father, Senator Marcus Sterling, didn't drive a minivan. He moved with a motorcade. And the storm that was about to descend on this parking lot was going to wash Brody Harrington and Officer Miller right off the face of the earth. 10 minutes. That's all it took. The first sign wasn't a siren. It was the sound of a helicopter. A low, thumping beat that shook the remaining glass in my car windows. A spotlight hit the parking lot, blindingly bright, pinning us all to the ground like insects. Then came the SUVs. 3 of them, black, tinted, moving in a formation that screamed federal. They screeched to a halt, boxing in Miller's cruiser. Doors flew open. Men in suits with earpieces poured out, not local cops. These were guys who didn't smile. Guys who carried themselves with lethal efficiency. Miller let go of me, stepping back, his hand trembling near his gun. Whoa, what is this? Federal jurisdiction? And then, from the middle SUV, he stepped out. My father. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing a tuxedo because he was supposed to be at a gala tonight. He looked like James Bond if James Bond was 6'4", black, and angry enough to melt steel with his eyes. He walked across the asphalt, ignoring the firemen who were finally arriving, ignoring the crowd, walking straight toward Miller. The crowd went silent. Someone whispered, "Oh my God, is that the senator?" Miller's face went pale. He recognized him. Everyone in the state recognized Marcus Sterling. He was the man who investigated police corruption for a living before he took office. Unlock him, my father said. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His voice was quiet. Deadly. Miller fumbled for his keys, dropping them twice before he managed to get the cuffs off me. I rubbed my wrists, feeling the blood rush back. Dante, my father said, putting a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I am now. My father turned to Miller. Badge number 4922. You detained a victim of a felony arson while aiding and abetting the perpetrator. You failed to secure a crime scene. You violated his Fourth Amendment rights. He looked over at Brody, who was trying to sneak away into the crowd. And you. Harrington, don't go anywhere. The FBI agents behind you are very fast runners. Brody froze. The color drained from his face until he looked like a sheet of paper. I didn't know who he was. It was a joke. It was just a prank, Senator. My dad is Preston Vance. He donated to your campaign. My father walked over to Brody, looming over him. You burned my son's property. You humiliated him. And you think your father's money is going to fix this? He laughed, a dry, humorless sound. Son, your father is going to need every dime he has for your legal defense fund. And tell him I'm returning his donation. With interest. Sarah, the girl from the shop, stepped forward then, holding up her phone. Her hands were shaking, but she was brave. Senator, I have it all on video, everything, from the moment they started harassing him. My father smiled at her, a genuine, warm smile that transformed his face. What is your name, young lady? Sarah. Sarah, you just became the most important person in this parking lot. The aftermath was a blur of activity, but it was the kind of chaos I enjoyed. Miller was stripped of his badge right there in the parking lot by his own captain, who had arrived looking terrified. Brody and his friends were in cuffs, weeping, actually weeping, as they were shoved into the back of a federal vehicle. But the real story, the part that sticks with me, happened 6 months later. You'd think the satisfaction of watching Brody Harrington get stuffed into the back of a squad car, crying like a toddler who dropped his ice cream, would be the peak of the story, right? The justice-served moment where the credits roll and the good guys walk off into the sunset. But life isn't a movie, and the legal system, well, it's a slow grinding machine, even when your dad is a senator. The real climax didn't happen in the parking lot. It happened in a quiet courtroom in D.C. on a rainy Tuesday in November. I was sitting at the plaintiff's table, wearing a new suit, looking calm on the outside, but feeling like a coiled spring on the inside. Brody was sitting across from me, but he looked different. Gone was the polo shirt and the arrogance. He was wearing an ill-fitting orange jumpsuit. His hair was grown out and messy, and he had lost about 20 pounds. He looked hollowed out. His father, Preston Vance, the real estate tycoon who used to walk around like he owned gravity, was sitting in the front row of the gallery, looking gray and defeated. Turns out, when the Attorney General's office starts digging into your son's life, they find other things too: embezzlement, tax fraud, and the family business. The fire Brody started had burned down his father's empire too. The judge, Honorable Eleanor Davies, peered over her glasses. Mr. Harrington, she said, her voice echoing in the wood-paneled room. You have pleaded guilty to arson, destruction of property, and filing a false police report. The prosecution is asking for 5 years in federal prison. Do you have anything to say? Brody stood up. His hands were shaking so bad his chains rattled. I'm sorry, he whispered. I didn't know. I was stupid. I just want to go home. It was pathetic. It was sincere, maybe, but it was the sincerity of a man who got caught, not a man who changed. Judge Davies turned to me. Mr. Sterling, as the victim, you have the right to make a victim impact statement. The floor is yours. I stood up. I walked to the podium. I looked at Brody. I looked at his dad. I thought about the McLaren, sure. But I also thought about the look in Officer Miller's eyes, the certainty that he could crush me because I didn't belong. I thought about all the guys who didn't have a senator for a father, who would have been the ones in the orange jumpsuit that night because nobody believed them. I took a deep breath. Your Honor, I began. Brody Harrington destroyed something I worked 6 years to earn. He tried to destroy my reputation. He weaponized the police against me. He treated me like a trespasser in my own life. Brody flinched. But I continued, and the room went dead silent. I am a civil rights attorney. I have spent my career fighting against a system that throws young men in cages and throws away the key. If I stand here and demand that you throw Brody in a hole for 5 years, I become part of that cycle. I become the thing I hate. Vengeance feels good, Your Honor, but it doesn't build anything. It just leaves more ash. My father, sitting in the front row, stiffened. He wanted blood. I knew he did. But he stayed quiet. I don't want Brody in prison, I said. Prison will just make him a better criminal. It will make him a victim in his own mind. I want him to understand. I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. I have a proposal for alternative sentencing, if the court and the defendant agrees. The judge raised an eyebrow. Go on. I want 5 years of probation, I said. But with conditions. Condition 1. Brody pays full restitution for the car, obviously. Condition 2. He completes 2,000 hours of community service. Not picking up trash on the highway. I want him to work at the Southside Legal Aid Clinic, the clinic where my mother used to scrub floors. I want him to answer the phones. I want him to intake the clients. I want him to look into the eyes of people who are losing their homes, their children, their freedom, because they don't have money or power. I want him to serve the people he thought he was better than. Brody looked up confused. He was expecting the hammer, and I was handing him a broom. And condition 3, I said, looking directly at Brody. Every month, for 5 years, we meet for coffee. You tell me what you learned. You tell me a name of someone you helped. If you miss a meeting, or if you don't learn a damn thing, then you go to prison. The courtroom was stunned. The prosecutor looked at me like I was insane. My father looked proud. The judge leaned back. Mr. Harrington, do you accept these terms? Brody looked at me, tears streaming down his face. Yes, he choked out. Yes, I accept. Then so ordered, Judge Davies banged the gavel. We walked out of the courtroom, and my father pulled me into a hug that nearly cracked my ribs. You're a better man than me, Dante, he said. I would have let him rot. That's why you're a politician, and I'm a lawyer. I grinned. 6 months later, I drove my new car, a Porsche 911 this time. Understated, classic, to a small coffee shop on 4th Street. I walked in and saw Brody sitting in the corner. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing jeans and a t-shirt with the Legal Aid logo on it. He looked tired. He looked like he'd been working. I sat down. Report. Brody took a sip of his black coffee. There's a woman, he said, his voice quiet. Mrs. Higgins. She was being evicted because her landlord wanted to turn her building into luxury condos. She's 70. Has nowhere to go. What did you do? I remembered something you did in the Bennett case. I looked up the zoning laws. Found a loophole. We filed an injunction this morning. She gets to stay. He looked up at me, and for the first time, there was a light in his eyes. Not arrogance. Not malice, purpose. It felt good, he admitted. To win for her. She cried. She hugged me. Welcome to the human race, Brody, I said. We talked for an hour. He told me about the people he met. He told me how ashamed he was of the guy he used to be. He told me his dad wasn't talking to him because Brody refused to help him hide assets from the feds. He was broke, living in a studio apartment, taking the bus. And he seemed happier than he ever did in that parking lot. As I left the coffee shop, I saw Sarah, the witness, the girl who filmed it all. We had started dating a few months after the fire. She was waiting by the car, smiling. How'd it go? She asked. He's learning, I said. Slowly. You're too nice. She laughed, kissing my cheek. Maybe, I said, opening the door for her. But I didn't just get my car back, Sarah. I got a life back. So that's the story. It wasn't about the car. The car was just metal and glass. It was about the moment the lighter dropped, and the choice I had to make between destroying a man or rebuilding one. I still think about that fire sometimes. I think about how fast everything can burn. But I also think about the phoenix. We all like to think we're the hero of the story, the one who rises from the ashes. But sometimes, the real work is helping the person who burned you rise too, so they don't burn anyone else. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If you held the lighter, if you had the power to burn down the life of the person who hurt you, would you drop it? Or would you offer them a hand out of the flames? I know my answer. What's yours? Let me know in the comments what you would have done. Would you have sent him to prison? Or would you have tried to fix him? Because honestly, fixing him was the hardest thing I ever did. But every time he saves a Mrs. Higgins, I know I made the right call. Thanks for watching. Stay safe out there, and remember, true power isn't about who you can destroy. It's about who you can save. See you in the next one.